Stanford took their fifth consecutive team title, 9 more Olympic spots were secured, and there is so much more gymnastics to come this week. For those new here, I'm Kensley. I'm the host of Neutral Deductions, a podcast all about men's gymnastics. And today I'm joined this week by two-time ECAC champion and former William & Mary gymnast Christian Marsh, who was at the NCAA championships and is going to help fill us in on everything that happened.
This is the Neutral Deductions Podcast, men's gymnastic news, coverage, and analysis. Hosted by Kensley Behel.
Christian, how are you?
I am so well. Thank you so much for having me. I had an absolute blast this weekend, and I'm grateful you reached out.
I am so excited to have you here. And you were there on the floor. So I was watching back at home. And so I can't wait to hear what were your insights? What did you see? What was your role there? And then let's dive into what happened in the competition.
Of course, yeah. So I was reached out to do commentary. And so I was on parallel bars. I sat there right on the floor getting absolutely crop dusted by chalk for 2 days, having the time of my life, just making sure that people at home knew what was going on. And to my credit, or to the athletes' credit, they made my job exceptionally easy. It was a great weekend.
It was a great weekend. So let's dive in. Let's start with qualification. So the way that the NCAA championships works, it's different than how the women does NCAA championships. So for the men, there is day one, which is all qualifications. It's in 2 subdivisions. And then day 2 is all finals. It's all around event and team finals. So coming in, I really felt like there was a pretty clear cut of the top 7 teams. And I was pretty sure that 6 of those top 7 teams were going to move on. What about you? Did you have a good feeling about who was going to move on to finals?
Yeah. So looking as William & Mary had only qualified as a team to NCAAs once, and while I was there, so I also like to look at the last team out because that's who determines who you're competing against to make it into finals. And so my eyes primarily were on Ohio State versus Penn State, who were just a rank apart, about a point apart in NQA for that 6th spot into finals, because I would drastically change who gets to qualify and who doesn't to day 2.
So coming out of qualification 1, I felt pretty sure that Stanford and Nebraska were going to qualify, in Illinois as well. But things actually got really interesting. Cal was leading above Illinois by several points there for a while. And I thought, oh my goodness, are they going to upset Illinois? Did you know what was going on in the arena, just being focused on parallel bars?
I was trying to keep an eye on everything, and I was reading the team scores at the end. And I'm sure I paused at one point when I was reading the Cal score, because I mean, they absolutely balled out. They had themselves a day.
Yeah, Cal has been so impressive this year. They broke 400 for the first time since I think 2016, and they ended up the year with a 407. And so that's going to be a team to watch, I think. And that makes things really exciting because for so long in men's gymnastics, we sort of had these top 3 teams of Stanford and Oklahoma and Michigan. They're the last teams to have ever won a national championship. And I'm just so excited to see maybe hopefully more diversity across the team so that we can have better competition overall.
Yeah, I know it's very exciting to see as things all bunched together, especially towards the end of the Olympic cycle, as everyone has been working on these versions of these routines for several years. So to see you guys step up and keep it interesting is my favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. So we Illinois ended up ending on vault. So vault is, as we know, the highest scoring event in men's gymnastics, and they did their job and they did end up qualifying over Cal. But I think Connor McCool on Twitter was saying that it was actually very stressful for them. They did know where they were and they did know that they were behind and that they had to hit. So kudos to them for making it through. The second qualifying session was always going to be a little bit more exciting, in my opinion. You had OU and Michigan, who I thought were very evenly matched. And then you had this battle between Ohio State and Penn State. Who was going to make it? Was it going to be the home team? Ohio State was hosting. Penn State had a ton of injuries coming in, so they were definitely a little bit down for the count. And in the end, Oklahoma ended up coming out on top, but by like 3
Thousands.
thousandths of a tenth. But they actually shouldn't maybe have been the team on top because Michigan incurred a neutral deduction. And can you explain what happened, why they incurred that 1 point neutral deduction?
Yeah, as it was explained to me, Michigan went not in the order listed on floor. They went out of order, and as a result, they incurred a 1.0 team deduction. So that 0.003 loss was in part due to that.
So if that happens, is that a coaching failure? Is that athletes didn't know? Like, how does that happen?
There's a whole bunch of people in that chain of commands, from the athletes to the coach to the officials who put the order in that is then given to the judges and then given to also, the commentators. My teammate and colleague Ian Creelman was commentating floor, and he noticed that it was out of order and assumed his information was wrong. But it could have been any number of things.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but the way I got into men's gymnastics was I was actually one of the managers for Michigan men's gymnastics back when Sam and Jordan and Syke were on the team. And I remember there was one competition. It was just a regular season meet, and I was going through and I was checking everything. And the head coach at the time, Kurt Golder, had accidentally put two pommel horse specialists up in the rings lineup. And like 2 minutes before the meet started, I'm like running over to Kurt and I was like, Kurt, you have to fix this. We're going to be in so much trouble if this happens. So, I mean, everyone's human, mistakes do happen, but it's just a funny little tidbit to add in. So, coming into finals, people were like, oh, this is going to be such a great battle. Like, it's because Stanford was down in third. And I was like, I think that Stanford has pulled a China here. I think that they have come in and that they've lowered difficulty. And it's even more so because there was nothing at stake for them qualifying. Everyone knew Stanford was going to go through as a team. There was no issue of that. And they did. They lowered their difficulty by like over 4.5 points in qualifications. And I was like, you guys, they have a lot left in the tank to come. And that's exactly what ended up happening.
They yeah, talking to the guys on the team, just guys around, they were like, "Oh, Stanford, qualified into third," and everyone's like, "Yeah, we know they watered down, but it was a question by how much did they water down?" And we really saw them kind of lean forward in their chairs, they too, and take that decisive victory, scoring 8 points higher.
I know. Well, I think one of the things that was most interesting about the rotation order is so coming into finals, I think for a lot of teams, rotation order matters. I know the last time Michigan won, they had led out of qualifying and they chose to start on pommel horse. And that seems to be a place where Michigan feels really comfortable. Stanford likes to start on vault. They like to come in, it's their strongest event. They just, get that big score and then they end up leading the whole way. And I really thought because Oklahoma was leading after qualifications, which meant that they were going to get the first part of rotation. And I really thought, I was like, oh, Oklahoma is going to steal vault away from Stanford and they're going to put them on their back foot. And when I found out that they were going in Olympic order, I was really surprised. And not to say that the outcome would have been any different, but I would have loved to see Stanford start on a different event, like have them start on like rings or something.
I am right there with you. I actually had that exact conversation with the coaches, but Mark loves to start on floor, the head coach for Oklahoma. It seems because they do almost every chance they've been given, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of athletes as well prefer to start in Olympic order. And I'm sure it wasn't just his decision. My guess is that there was a team discussion with the athletes as well about what order do you want to start on. And, as we said, Stanford ended up winning by a massive margin. I'm not sure it would have made that much of a difference. But I think what did make a big difference was Michigan. And Michigan counted several falls across the meet. In fact, at one point, they were about a tenth apart from Stanford, if I'm remembering correctly. It was very, very close. And then Paul Judah fell on his Busnari, had a couple falls on high bar. Fred fell on high bar. I don't know if they counted any other falls. That's just what they showed on the mainstream. And unfortunately, that sort of took them out of the running because I think they were realistically the team that was going to be able to most closely challenge Stanford.
I'd agree with that. And so it's always tough when you train that's routine all season, especially as a team, and it doesn't all come together on the day. But they still did lots of great gymnastics, lots of fun to watch. I mean, their parallel bars rotation was very, very exciting at the very least.
Yeah, tell me, what was your favorite parallel bar routine of the weekend, or maybe a couple things that you thought were superb?
Oh, favorite? That's a great question. Um, I'm struggling to remember his name. It might be Logan from Michigan, does a giant straddle cut. That is crazy. Yeah, I love giant on P bars. It's actually my favorite skill to just do personally. Like I'll run them barehanded, some multiple in a row. I love that skill. And to add the straddle cut where you're catching like blinds with the extra cut through is nuts. Jaden Blank from Army had a couple really unique skills that I liked. He's an underbar cast to support, and I like it when people find, just like weird things in the code like that they're good at and make it look good. I enjoyed that. And then of course we have the obvious ones like, Asher and Josh Carnes just doing like the hardest gymnastics you'll like ever see and making it look good.
Yeah, I think Crew Bold's parallel bar routine really stuck out to me. Um, Josh Carnes on high bar, he is such a fast twitch athlete. So my husband doesn't like he's kind of gotten into gymnastics because of my knowledge. And I was like, so this athlete here, he's a fast twitch athlete. I was like, can you just see how much faster he does all the skills? And he was like, no, I actually can see it. And Josh is a superstar, and he's not on everyone's radar, and I wish he was because he's so exciting to watch and he's so talented. And the high performance director, Brett McClure, said that basically Josh can do any skill in the code of points. He's just like this uber talented athlete who has unfortunately dealt with some injuries. But I, yeah, for me, watching his gymnastics was a highlight for me.
I've looked at his Bobzar and Tapel before. I'm trying to learn those skills right now, just as I mess around in my retirement. And the way he does that skill technically is not super common, at least in the other videos I watch. Funnily enough, I picked two, and I picked Zhu Jingwan from China, and I picked his because I know they both get great amplitude and they do the skills so differently. But the way Josh flies is unreal.
Yeah, it's true, and that's for those maybe newer in gymnastics, wanting to learn more about women's gymnastics. A lot of the skills like the Bobzar and the Tapelt, a big problem that we see is that athletes are too low and they don't turn over quickly enough, and there's just not enough amplitude. But with Zojing Yuan and, like you said, Josh Carnes, that's not usually a problem, and they're exceptionally well done. So thank you for sharing that so much. So in the end, we ended up having Stanford on top, followed by Michigan, then Oklahoma, and it was really, really, really close there. Then Nebraska had themselves a day, and then Illinois and then Ohio State brought up the rear. So let's talk about the all around for a second. Coy Young, the man, won by a huge margin. Oh my goodness. I Coy is just, he's not only a fantastic athlete, but just a really, really good person. And so he won the all around by over 2 points. So he got an 86.098, and Fred Richard was in second with an 83.999. One of the coolest things about Coy's all around to me is he basically hasn't competed all around all year. I think he only competed it once in the regular season and then showed up at MPSF, won MPSF championship, showed up at NCAA, and everyone was like, oh, Fred's gonna win, Fred's gonna win. And then, or maybe Asher, but Asher didn't do all around, which I was gonna ask you about. Do you know why Asher didn't do all around?
Yeah, I talked to him briefly. I think he mentioned some back issues. So I think mostly resting up and preparing to be in best shape possible for, the elite championship season that's coming up.
Okay. And then Coy came out and was just like, here I am. Like, you think I'm just a pommel and vault guy? No, you're wrong. And it just there was just such a strong and such a statement performance.
Yeah, I love Koi gymnastics. I've had the absolute pleasure of watching it. Even when we were younger, I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, and Koi went to Sportsplex, which is in Prince George's County, so like 30 minutes away from where I lived. I remember like when, he used to do horse without the handles. I was like, well, it's not going to look that good when they put them back on, and it did. Yeah, no, he's always been fantastic, both as an athlete and as a guy. So I was really happy to see him win, and his gymnastics is just like lots of gymnastics is excellent, but his is almost a performance in the way it is confident and precise without sacrificing any execution. It is like it truly does look like he is performing for us, and it's fantastic.
I will. So when Stanford ended up going to pommel horse, so like as we are going through the finals, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but like Patty Hoops had come in with a massive 15.3 on pommel horse, and so okay, we have to just jump ahead to this because I ran into Patrick Hoops at the airport in January. So I live in the Denver area, and then he of course trains at Air Force, and so Air Force typically ends up having to fly like Colorado Springs through Denver to go to any major place that they're going to go. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're Patty Hoops." And he was like, "How do you know who I am?" And I was like, so we talked, and so We've, run into each other a couple times that way. And I really think that him being added to national team and then doing so well on the World Cup circuit has just really increased his confidence. And he hit both routines both days. He ended up getting a 15.3 early on in the competition. And I thought, oh, and after Ignacio Jockers fell, I was like, oh, the only person who's going to challenge this is Coy. And Coy almost took that title away from him, but he didn't end up taking it. So just anyway, back to Coy. All overall, just like such a fantastic athlete, a fantastic human, and just really, really excited for him. Let's move on to event finals and talk me through what you saw, what was exciting, and then who won the different events.
We had Paul winning floor, which would not have been most people's guess, with Emre and Connor McCool leading into day one, and just Nate like nationally. I mean, they've been like 1 and 2 in that order respectively, like all season. And Paul, I assume he did what he did. I didn't catch all of the set, but I did catch the end, and he went out there, gave nothing away in the air, stuck some landings, and came away with a score that is impressively close to his start value.
Well, and I think Taylor Christopoulos was leading like almost the entire way, and then probably thought, oh, maybe I'm gonna get this title. And then Paul at the very last routine was like, no, I'm gonna take it away from you.
Yeah,
But
if I had a
Paul's
nickel for
gymnastics is just so clean. It is unreal. He's one of the athletes who I feel like his scores are truly, truly deserved, and maybe even a little low.
I'd love this. Yeah, I'd love to see him graft just like Paul's average score, like relative to other athletes. Cause yeah, no, he is very, very clean. And once again, without sacrificing that, difficulty, it's not always the most difficult set you're going to see of the day, but it's not like he's up there doing a 4.8. Like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then we already talked about Patty Hoops from Air Force One Pommel Horse. Cool thing about that, first ever national title from an Air Force athlete. So that was really neat to see. And then who ended up taking still rings vault and parallel bars?
oh, the man, the myth, the legend, Asher Hong. And I'll be darned if he did not deserve it, because he had himself a day on all three of those events. I mean, yeah, rings, he's so strong on rings. He does the invert, he does two Malteses, he does planches, he does crosswork, and then he has the nerve to dismount with a lay double double. It's a gorgeous routine, truly world class.
And did we see any upgrades from him between day one and day two?
Yeah, cause 1.5 or a 2.5 twist from the table. I always refer to it to the number of twist from the table because it's easier that way. Is day one, which is also his warm up for the Rise Guang, which he landed and won with day two.
I just I don't understand that because he used to do the cause 2.5. And so to me, I would think a cause 1.5 would be the warm up for the cause 2.5. And it's not. I don't and granted, I have never done gymnastics anywhere near that difficult, but it doesn't make any sense to me to do that as a timer because I don't when Donnell Wittenberg competes that vault, he does a flipping timer. So it's interesting.
Yeah, different for everyone. I guess if you're just looking at emphasizing like a good run down the runway where you hit the board hard, you hit the table hard, and you pull a twist, like, at 2.5, if you can do a 3.5, 2.5 isn't too hard for you. So it might be like his equivalent of, just doing a full for normal guys who do like a double full vault.
Yeah.
I know like when I would do triple, I kind of got to the point where I stopped doing double backs just because I didn't want to take the turn.
Yeah.
So I'd like warm up one giant double, like single flip, and then I do a triple instead of hitting the 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, amazing. All right, let's move on to high bar. So high bar, big surprise with the winner, Tate Costa of Illinois. I think everyone coming in was like, "Oh, this is Fred's. Like, no one's gonna touch this." But Fred fell, and then we ended up with a three-way tie. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it appears you could not buy a 14 on high bar this weekend if you wanted to. We had the three-way tie with Zach Titterman, Taylor Christopoulos, and of course, who came out on top, Tate Costa, all at a 13-9 apiece, and all, just exceptional high bar workers. Zach, who earlier in the year put up the highest score in Nebraska program history on high bar with a 14.65. So just a great group of high bar workers who all put it together on the same day. And I don't explicitly remember how ties are broken. I assume by score.
Yeah,
Well,
it's by E and D score. So if they had had the same D and E, it wouldn't have been broken. But Tate Costa only had a 5.0 D and but an 8.9 execution. And then Teeterman had a 5.2 D and then an 8.7 execution. And then Christopoulos a 5.7 D and then an 8.2 execution, all ending with that 13.9. So just a really interesting thing, and really pleased for Tate as well. And Tate is actually one of the athletes who ended up being able to move on to the US national championships that are going to happen in Fort Worth later this year. So this meet also served as the final qualifier into this year's Olympic cycle. And the way it worked was that an athlete had to, up to 6 athletes could qualify as long as they were in the top 10 and all around. And we knew that this was going to be really difficult because we had people like Coy and Fred and Asher who were all pre-qualified, and they did. They took the top 6 spots, all of those pre-qualified athletes. And then Tate Costa from Illinois, Sam Phillips of Nebraska, Noah Neufeld from California, and Eric Upton from Air Force all have earned their spots to compete at the national championship later this year. So that's really cool for them.
excited to see Sam there. He's been so good forever. It's always great to watch him compete.
Yeah. Can we just take a minute for his floor routine? I mean, like one of the men who put artistry back in artistic gymnastics. I love seeing his personality. I love the turns, the leaps, the crowning himself. It's just so fun, and I always look forward to seeing his floor routine.
Oh, and yeah, and it is such an exciting set as well, right? He looks like he's playing out there, and I mean the set he did, because he also got All America honors on floor, right? And I wanted to check him for Velcro after he was sticking everything. It was fantastic. So yeah, it's like tough, to have a celebration where you crown yourself afterwards, and he like it looks so natural when he does it because he like crowns himself, and I'm like, yeah, no, that checks out. This guy did in fact like he did that.
I know. I really would love to see him do a routine to floor. Like there's a couple of the guys that I really think could pull it off in a few different styles. And I'm like, it's not against the code of points. Please do it. Just because I think it would just add that extra layer of energy to his already fantastic routine. So NCAA's was not the only thing that happened this weekend. We also had the Doha World Cup, which was the final of the World Cup qualifiers. This was absolutely a crazy competition. So let's dive in. So coming into this competition, 3 gymnasts had already secured their spots via points, and that was Roo Seung-yoon of Korea on floor, Ahmed Abu Al Sud of Jordan on pommel horse, who, by the way, is the first Olympic gymnast ever from Jordan. He is also 2022 world medalist on pommel horse, so he's going to be one to watch. And then Tung Jahung of Taiwan on high bar had also secured a spot. So 9 spots were up to grab. Now, I know that you were super busy at NCAA's. Did you get a chance to watch or follow along with the World Cup at all?
Yeah, so I got bits and pieces here and there. So I did watch Ahmad's set, and I there's so much that's awesome about it. I mean, the travel sequence where he just kind of like steps over the middle on everything. The fact that he does a vomit, such an uncommon skill, very cool. But I think it's worth pointing out he also does like a sewn flop ninth skill in that set, and that is one of the most unhinged things I've ever seen in all of gymnastics, and I love it. And yeah, I mean he's scoring around like a 15.5 now regularly. That's Olympic champion territory.
Yeah, for sure. I it makes me like a little bit nervous for Reese McClanagan, who I really enjoy because his gymnastics is so clean. But there are several athletes who are consistently scoring in that 15.5 range. And I'm like, oh, well, the pommel horse final is so exciting. And I know people are like, oh, we should get rid of pommel horse. I'm like, no, no, no. This
No.
final is going to be the best final that there is at the Olympics.
No, seriously. My tinfoil hat theory here, if you'll stick with me, is like during COVID, 2021, lots of people had palm access to pommel horse, right? And so I know guys who just did horse for like 7 months straight because their gyms were closed. Right. And so we're in this new code now, and you've got that extra horse work on top of everything. And I think we're starting to see like the delayed effects of some of this like specialized horse work that people got time to do, better or worse in that situation.
That's a really interesting theory, and I actually think you're completely correct on that. Going back to floor exercise. So floor coming in was going to be one of the most difficult ones to decide. There were so many athletes who could have gotten that second spot, and it ended up going to Arel Binovic of Croatia, which I find really interesting because Arel is not known. He's a fantastic gymnast, really, really powerful. but he's really not known for his consistency. And for him to get that spot, it was really interesting to me. And he's been training with Ilya Kovtun, a Ukrainian athlete who's moved to Croatia for the time being. And so I kind of wonder, I want to ask, like, has training with Ilya maybe helped your consistency or build your confidence in any sort of way? Pommel horse Nariman Kurbanov took that second spot, which is fantastic for him. It's also really disappointing for Lee Chi Kai, who had a really rough start to the series and then it just ramped up at the end. And unfortunately, it just wasn't enough to overtake Kurbanov. And I saw an interview with Lee Chi Kai saying that he's like done, like that this is going to be the end for him, which I think is really devastating because someone who could potentially be an Olympic champion is not going to be at the Olympics.
I know that is absolutely heartbreaking. He's got some of the best horsework in the world. I mean, clearly, but the Olympic qualification like system is not super well understood by me, so I can't comment on it. But it is a shame you won't get to see that.
Yeah, the only other option he would have is to win an all-around spot at the Asian Championships. But if he's burnt out and not going to be competing there, then then his run is over. Moving on to still rings, Von Dovtian of Armenia, finally going to be an Olympian. I'm super excited for him. Semirat Said of France nabbed that second spot, which this has a lot of really interesting implications. So a lot of people know Semirat Said unfortunately, from his vault in 2016 Olympics, where he had a really horrific injury and has come back and been able to to excel on still rings. And because the French team didn't qualify a team, they didn't qualify anyone through all around at world championships. Their only way left to qualify was going to be through this World Cup series or through the all around at European championships. And if they didn't, they were going to kind of get this like host pity spot, is how people sort of deem it. He ended up winning the spot, which means that host French spot gets reallocated back into the 2023 World Championship pool into the all around, which means Khabibullah Urgashev of Uzbekistan is now going to the Olympics because he was the next best all arounder at the 2023 World Championship. So that actually had like this tumble effect of who was going to make it.
A lovely little windfall there. Awesome. And not complete windfall. I mean, you have to do that well to be in that position. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is. And so vault had a similar thing happen. So Shek Wei Hung qualified in, and Mahdi Olfadi of Iran, he qualified in. And a lot of people are confused why he got the spot over James from Australia. And so I need to explain a little bit what happened. So Audris Ninrace had quote unquote gotten the spot, the all around spot from the Pan American Games that happened last year. But continental championships are not awarded their spots until after the World Cup circuit ends. So he was still getting points for vault all the way through this series. Had he not gotten those points, then it would have changed the order of athletes that would have competed. So that's just an interesting tidbit of how the dominoes sort of fell for vault. Parallel bars. Have you been following Angel Barajas of Colombia's?
Yeah, no, thanks to you. That he is unreal. I love to, and I love to watch.
Yeah, so he is an interesting case because the PAGU chose to have their continental competition last year, which meant Angel was not old enough to compete. This is one of the best gymnasts in the world, up and coming, one you definitely need to be following. So his only chance to compete was going to be through the World Cup circuit this year, and he ended up nabbing a parallel bar spot. But I think the event that you need to watch him on is high bar. He has a 6.8 D score, you guys. It's unreal. So keep him on his list of athletes to watch. And then Razuljan Burakimova got the second spot for parallel bars. Coming into high bar, as I mentioned, Tung Jiahong of Taiwan got that high bar spot, and Robert Taborogal got the final high bar spot there. So Arthur Nori, to get to the Olympics, is going to need to be awarded that Brazil spot that they earned at the World Championship, and I think it's going to be a really, really tough call for if they're going to give him that spot or not. So we may or may not see him at the Olympics. Moving on, upcoming competitions, we have Pac Rim Championships happening this week, April 26th and 28th. For the men's competition, that will be streamed and have live scores. The European Championships are happening in Italy this week, April 24th through 28th. Updates there: Lucas Dowser, current world champion on parallel bars, had to withdraw. Lucas Kocken, also of Germany, had to withdraw. So they've got a pretty depleted team. Max Whitlock, reigning double Olympic or three-time Olympic champion, he had to withdraw. So he's going to be replaced by James Hall in the team. And then Luke Whitehouse is going to get that individual spot at the European Championships this year. There is an Olympic spot up for grabs. So whoever wins or gets the highest ranked all around spot, who's not either from a pre-qualified team or a pre-qualified individual, will end up going. So that's something else to watch. Christian, thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you listening, if you would please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast, it helps others find neutral deductions and learn more about men's gymnastics. If you would like to help bring more live men's gymnastics coverage, please consider donating. We are entirely listener supported at this point, and even $10 helps us cover a meal. We are headed to Colorado Springs in May for the national team camp. So if you are able and willing to help bring that coverage to life, the PayPal link is in every show note and at the bottom of every article on neutraldeductions.com. If you have any questions, comments, or insider tips, you can email Kensley at neutraldeductions@gmail.com. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time.